A single manuscript once held a value greater than an entire farm. This was the fragile reality of knowledge in the Middle Ages, a world where monks became the ultimate guardians of books. We are exploring 24 monastic hacks for knowledge survival, a catalogue of ingenious tricks developed to protect precious texts from everything from theft to decay. By the end, you will possess a complete blueprint of ancient strategies that are shockingly relevant for securing our own digital lives today. How did they create books with secret paintings only visible to those who knew the trick? And what clever psychological traps did they build into the bindings themselves? What forgotten method from a medieval library could you use to better protect your most important information right now? The Armarium stood as the silent guardian of the scriptorium, a locked cupboard of oak and iron that held the monastery's most precious wealth. Inside, each manuscript rested in a specific, assigned place, a system so precise it was more like a treasury vault than a simple bookshelf. This was the birth of library classification. Monks did not merely stack books at random. They developed intricate systems using painted symbols, Roman numerals, or short descriptions that corresponded to a master list, the library's secret code. You would find all the Bibles grouped together, perhaps on the highest and most secure shelf. Directly below them might be the works of the Church Fathers, and below those, the historical chronicles and rare texts on medicine or astronomy. This order was a deliberate defense. A chaotic library meant lost books, damaged parchments, and wasted hours of desperate searching. The goal was to allow even a new novice to walk in, consult the list, and retrieve a specific psalter without fumbling through a disordered pile. As the great scholar Cassiodorus famously declared, order is the key to preserving the treasures of the mind. This foundational hack, this simple act of putting everything in its right place, was the essential first step. It created a stable, known environment, a controlled universe of knowledge where nothing could simply vanish. And from this stable foundation, an even more powerful tool for protecting books would emerge, one that aimed to capture the very soul of the library in a single, portable object. But the Armarium's physical order was only half the defense. Its true power was unlocked by a second, even more ingenious hack, the creation of the Inventarium. This was the library's master key, a comprehensive catalogue that recorded every single book in the monastery's possession. These were far more than simple lists. They were detailed inventories handwritten on durable parchment that meticulously logged the title, the author, the subject, the physical condition, and even the name of the generous donor who had provided the manuscript. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a sophisticated database. Some of these catalogues went a step further, including brief summaries or key opening phrases from the text itself. This allowed a monk to search for a specific concept or argument without needing to pull every single volume from the shelf. It was, in essence, an early search engine. Consider the famous catalogue from the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland. It meticulously described over 400 separate volumes. One entry might note a psalter with golden letters, while another carefully listed a book of medicine with cures for fever. This level of detail transformed the library from a static collection into a living, breathing resource. The librarian could now track the entire collection, identify gaps in their knowledge, and most importantly, prevent losses by knowing exactly what they owned. If a book was missing from its assigned place in the Armarium, the Inventarium provided the proof. This monumental task of record-keeping, done entirely by hand, demonstrated a profound commitment to intellectual stewardship. It was a declaration that knowledge was not just to be stored, but to be managed, understood, and protected. With this complete mental map of their literary treasury established, the monks then faced the next great challenge. How do you physically stop someone from simply walking away with one of these irreplaceable treasures? The answer was as brutal as it was brilliant. The sound of an iron chain sliding along a metal rod was the common noise of study in a late medieval library. This third hack, the chained library, transformed the entire reading experience into a secure transaction. A book was no longer a simple object you could carry away. It became a fixed asset, physically anchored to the very furniture that housed it. The system was brilliantly simple. A sturdy chain, often several feet long, was fastened to a metal boss on the book's heavy wooden binding. The other end of the chain ran freely on a horizontal rod mounted along the shelf above. This design granted just enough freedom. A scholar could lift the volume from its shelf, carry it the short distance to the reading desk built right into the bookcase, and spend hours in study. But they could not take the book beyond that designated space. The chain ensured the manuscript never left the room. This was not about distrust, but about collective responsibility. In an age before printing presses, every book was literally irreplaceable. Its loss would be a catastrophic blow to the monastery's intellectual and spiritual life. The immense cost of materials and the hundreds of hours of a scribe's labor meant a single illuminated manuscript truly could be valued as highly as a plot of farmland. The chains were a pragmatic acknowledgement of that staggering worth. You can still witness this system in its original state today at places like the Hereford Cathedral Library in England. Walking through it is like stepping back in time, seeing the very same chains that once ensured St. Augustine's writings or a precious medical text remained exactly where they belonged. The gentle clink of those chains was a constant, reassuring reminder. It was the sound of knowledge being shared openly, yet protected fiercely. This balance between access and security forces us to look closer beyond the furniture and the chains to the books themselves. What if the object being protected was also designed to be its own guardian? Even the most secure chain could not prevent a determined thief from simply removing a book's cover to disguise it. This vulnerability demanded a defense that was part of the book's very soul, an artistic stealth that turned the manuscript itself into a secret guardian. The fourth hack was for edge painting, a technique of breathtaking subtlety. An artist would take a closed book and carefully fan its pages, clamping them in place. On the slanted surface of the page edges, they would paint a beautiful landscape, a portrait of a saint, or the monastery's own coat of arms. The true magic was revealed only when the book was closed. The immense pressure of the binding would squeeze the pages together, completely concealing the artwork. To anyone casually handling the volume, it appeared to be a perfectly ordinary book with a plain, gilded edge. But if a monk or a trusted scholar fanned the pages, the hidden treasure was revealed. Imagine a beautiful Bible that, when closed, looked like any other. But when its pages were flexed, a brilliant image of St. Jerome, the great translator of the text, would appear as if from nowhere. This was more than just a beautiful secret. It was a brilliant form of identification. A thief who stole the book would likely never know about the unique painting hidden within its structure. If the monastery's agents later found the stolen manuscript in a market, they could simply fan the pages to reveal their undeniable proof of ownership. This was security through artistry, a gentle but powerful psychological barrier. The very object of desire was engineered to betray the thief who possessed it. This elegant fusion of beauty and protection shows us that the monks saw security not as a brutal imposition, but as an integrated feature of their sacred work. And this philosophy of integrated defense would be taken to its logical and astonishing extreme within the book's binding. The book itself could become a labyrinth, deliberately designed to mislead any unauthorized hand. This fifth hack involved misfolding pages and structural traps, a brilliant form of defensive bookbinding. Monastic craftsmen would sometimes bind a quire, a small section of pages, in the wrong order. Or they might carefully fold a single page so that it appeared blank or out of sequence to someone quickly rifling through the manuscript. To a thief assessing his prize, this made the book seem flawed, damaged, and far less valuable. Why risk stealing a Bible that seemed to have entire missing chapters or confusing, jumbled passages? But the monks who created the book knew its secret lay out intimately. They understood that the text on the misfolded page was actually complete, simply concealed within the structure. They knew that the seemingly blank leaves were part of the design, perhaps intended for future notes or illustrations. This was security through perceived imperfection. It preyed upon a criminal's greed and haste, turning the thief's own rush to profit against him. A stolen book with a hidden flaw was a financial loss, and that was a powerful deterrent. This method required an incredible level of skill and coordination between the bookbinder and the librarian. It was a silent pact, a shared secret that protected their collective treasure. Only someone with the key, the mental map of the book's true architecture, could navigate its contents correctly. This deceptive craftsmanship reveals a profound truth. The monks were not just building physical barriers, they were engineering psychological ones, manipulating perception itself to guard their knowledge. This deep, integrated approach to protection extended far beyond the book's binding, shaping the very rooms where these treasures were kept. A gentle, controlled light was the only illumination permitted to touch a priceless manuscript. The sixth hack for knowledge survival was the library's environment itself, a holistic defense against decay. Monks understood that their greatest enemies were not just thieves, but also time and the elements. They engineered their libraries with the precision of modern conservators. Large windows were strategically placed to capture the soft, northern light, perfect for hours of reading and copying without the harsh glare of direct sun that would slowly bleach the vibrant inks and darken the delicate parchment. These windows were often fitted with shutters or the thickest available glass, creating a stable, filtered environment. The introduction of artificial light was handled with even greater care. While candles and oil lamps were essential for study during long winter evenings, they represented a terrifying risk. A single spilled lamp could erase centuries of work in minutes. For this reason, these open flames were strictly confined to designated reading stands, placed well away from the precious shelves. The library's very location was a calculated choice. You would often find it on an upper floor, high above the creeping dampness of the earth, which encouraged destructive mold and attracted book-eating insects. Some librarians took this a step further, scattering dried lavender and rosemary among the shelves. These herbs were not merely for a pleasant fragrance, they were a natural, aromatic pest control, their pungent scents repelling silverfish and moths that would gladly feast on the animal skin pages. This entire system reveals a profound truth. The monks saw preservation as a constant, active battle on multiple fronts. They were not just guarding books from people, but from nature itself. Yet, even the most perfectly controlled environment is only as secure as the people allowed to enter it. The librarian held the ultimate key, not of iron, but of sacred trust. This was the seventh hack for knowledge survival, a system of control built on solemn oaths and meticulous access protocols. Becoming a librarian was not a simple chore rotation, it was a profound appointment. The chosen monk would swear a formal oath, vowing before God and the abbot to protect the collection from all harm, from fire and water, from theft, and most of all, from neglect. This vow transformed the role from a mere custodian into a spiritual guardian. His duties extended far beyond dusting shelves. He was the intellectual gatekeeper of the entire monastery. Access to the library was a carefully managed privilege. Typically, only senior monks and the most vetted of outside scholars were permitted to enter that hallowed space. The process to borrow a book was a ritual in itself. It required written permission from the abbot or prior, and the librarian would meticulously record the transaction in a special logbook. This ledger noted the name of the borrower, the title of the manuscript, and the strict date by which it must be returned. This created a powerful early audit trail, a chain of custody for every single book. If a valuable text on medicine or law went missing, the librarian could immediately see who had it last. This system of accountability made theft an incredibly high-risk endeavor, as the trail of evidence led directly back to the culprit. The librarian's oath was the invisible lock that complemented the physical chains, a human layer of security that made the entire system resilient. And this human gatekeeper, armed with his logbook and his vow, would employ one of the most psychologically clever tricks of all to protect his charges, a simple mark that could brand a thief for life. The library's heavy doors were a statement in oak and iron. This eighth hack transformed the repository of knowledge into a fortress, with vaulted rooms and reinforced doors that made the library one of the most secure locations in the entire monastery. In wealthier houses, the collection might be housed in a dedicated strongroom, a true vault with stone walls several feet thick. The entrance to this sanctum was a masterpiece of medieval carpentry and metalwork. A single door, constructed from planks of dense, heavy wood, would be bound and studded with thick iron bands. It was secured not with a simple key, but with a large, complex lock mechanism whose intricate iron key was a symbol of immense responsibility. Only two people typically held a copy, the abbot and the librarian himself. This physical separation was often doubled by the library's location, carefully situated within the cloister. The cloister was the monastery's spiritual and administrative heart, a secluded inner courtyard surrounded by covered walkways, accessible only to the monks and strictly off-limits to outsiders. Placing the library here added a powerful social and spiritual barrier to the physical one. A visitor would need to pass through multiple layers of monastic life before even reaching the library's intimidating doorway. Even the windows, designed to let in that perfect northern light, could serve a dual purpose. They were sometimes fitted with slender but sturdy iron bars. While these certainly deterred thieves, their primary function was often more practical, to prevent birds from flying in and nesting among the shelves, or to stop larger pests from gaining entry. The cumulative effect of this architecture was a powerful, unspoken message. Anyone approaching this space understood immediately that what lay inside was not merely important, it was sacred, invaluable, and protected by every means available. This fortress-like approach to housing knowledge shows us just how deeply they valued the written word, and that profound value was reflected not just in the room that held the books, but in the very skin and ink used to create them. The strength of a book's pages was matched only by the permanence of its words. This ninth hack for knowledge survival began with the very skin of the book itself, the parchment. Monastic scribes were not just writers, they were master curators of material. They understood that the journey of a manuscript started long before a single drop of ink touched its surface. It began with a careful selection of animal skin. The finest texts were often written on vellum, a luxurious parchment made from the skins of newborn calves. This material was incredibly smooth, beautifully pale, and remarkably durable. For less expensive volumes, they might use the skins of sheep or goats, each type offering a different texture and tone. The transformation from raw hide to writing surface was a grueling, weeks-long process. The skins were thoroughly washed, then soaked in a lime solution to loosen the hair. They were meticulously scraped clean of all flesh and fat, stretched taut on a wooden frame, and finally sanded with pumice stone to achieve that perfectly smooth finish. The result was a material so tough and resilient it could survive centuries of use. A thick, high-quality parchment page was less likely to tear, to curl from humidity, or to be damaged by the oils on a reader's fingers. This inherent durability was a brilliant, passive form of security. By investing immense effort and resources into the physical object, the monks ensured the knowledge it contained had the best possible chance of enduring. The book itself became a fortress, its very walls built to withstand the slow siege of time, and upon this formidable foundation, they would inscribe their words with an ink designed to be just as eternal. The scribe's pen moved with a rhythm of pure efficiency, transforming entire phrases into a cascade of cryptic symbols. This 10th hack, the art of abbreviation, was born from a simple, pressing need to save precious space on incredibly expensive parchment. But this system of shorthand quickly evolved into something far more powerful, a subtle code that protected the text's meaning as much as it conserved the page. Common words were collapsed into elegant marks. The Latin word for and et became the familiar ampersand we still use today. A simple horizontal slash could stand for a whole syllable, like the commonibus ending. A tiny letter P with a line through it might represent the word per or pro. To an untrained eye, a page dense with these symbols looked like an impenetrable cipher. This was the point. While the primary goal was to write faster and use less material, a wonderful side effect was a kind of intellectual security. A casual thief or an uneducated interloper trying to copy a manuscript would stumble over these marks, introducing errors or giving up in frustration. The true meaning of the text remained accessible only to those who had been trained in the scribble arts, those who held the mental key to this visual language. This coding even extended to individual scriptoriums, which often developed their own unique house styles of abbreviation. A monk from one monastery might glance at a book from another and immediately recognize the subtle variations, the local dialect of symbols that identified its origin. This created a gentle but effective moat around the knowledge, ensuring that only the initiated could navigate the river of words with confidence. This coded language of the pen, however, was just one layer of a deeper visual strategy. The same impulse to protect and identify would soon blossom into the vibrant, hidden world of manuscript decoration. A book's final page often held its fiercest guardian. The 11th hack for protecting knowledge was the Colophon, a personal inscription placed at the very end of a manuscript. Far more than a simple signature, this was the scribe's final act of ownership and defense. In these brief paragraphs, the creator recorded the book's vital history, his own name, the date of completion, the location of the scriptorium, and the name of the patron who had funded the sacred work. But the most striking part of the Colophon was often a direct appeal to divine justice. A typical example might solemnly declare, "This book belongs to the monastery of St. Martin. Whoever steals it or erases this inscription, may he be cursed. Amen." This was not an idle threat in a deeply religious society. The fear of eternal damnation was a powerful psychological deterrent, a spiritual chain that could not be broken by any physical force. The Colophon transformed the manuscript from a simple object into an entity with a soul, a known history, and a celestial protector. It embedded the monastery's legal and spiritual claim directly into the sacred text itself, making that claim as permanent as the words of the gospel. Anyone contemplating theft would have to grapple with the terrifying prospect of not just earthly punishment, but heavenly wrath. This practice of inscribing ownership directly into the narrative was a brilliant, layered defense. Yet for all its power, the written curse was only one form of identification. Monastic librarians complemented this verbal claim with a more immediate, visual one, branding their property with marks that were impossible to ignore. A monastery's identity was pressed directly into the skin of its books. The 12th hack for securing knowledge involved wax seals and embossed stamps, a tactile and authoritative form of branding that made ownership undeniable. When a new manuscript was completed or acquired, the librarian would perform a final, formal act of authentication. He would melt a stick of sealing wax, let a drop of it fall onto a blank page at the front or back of the book, and then firmly press the monastery's official metal seal matrix into the soft material. As the wax cooled and hardened, it captured an intricate design, often featuring the image of the community's patron saint or its unique coat of arms. This was far more than a simple signature. It was a miniature work of art that was incredibly difficult to forge without access to the original metal stamp. The same principle applied to the book's exterior. Craftsmen would use heated metal tools to emboss symbolic designs directly into the leather of the binding. These impressions, whether a simple cross or a complex heraldic beast, were permanently baked into the material. A thief now faced a daunting physical challenge. To erase the monastery's claim, he would have to carefully scrape away the brittle wax seal, inevitably damaging the precious parchment beneath. Or he would need to somehow remove the embossed stamp from the leather, a destructive process that would leave obvious scars and dramatically reduce the book's value on any market. This system transformed every volume into an unshakable ambassador for its home library. The sight of that familiar seal was an immediate declaration: this book belongs to us. It was a silent, permanent sentinel standing guard over the words within. This physical branding worked in perfect harmony with the written curses of the Colophon, creating a dual-layered defense of both the body and the soul of the manuscript. But what if the threat was not a lone thief, but a catastrophic event that could wipe out the entire library in an instant? A university stationer's shop held the key to an entire curriculum, but it was a key that never left the room. This 13th hack for knowledge survival was the Pecia system, a brilliantly organized method for mass-producing textbooks with unwavering accuracy. In bustling medieval university towns like Paris or Bologna, the demand for copies of Aristotle's works or legal commentaries far outstripped the ability of any single scriptorium to produce them. The solution was a form of controlled, distributed copying. An official stationer, a licensed bookseller, maintained a certified master copy of a text known as the exemplar. This master was not a single bound volume, but a collection of separate, numbered booklets called Pecia, each containing a specific section of the work. A student scribe needing to earn money or a professional copyist would arrive at the stationer's shop. Instead of borrowing the entire, invaluable text, he would pay a fee to rent just one Pecia at a time. He would take that single, manageable section back to his desk, copy it with care, and then return it to exchange for the next one in the sequence. This simple, repeatable process was a revolution in information security. The certified master copy never left the stationer's secure custody, protecting it from loss, theft, or the gradual damage of constant handling. By limiting access to one small piece at a time, the system also guaranteed a remarkable consistency across all the copies produced from that master. It was a medieval assembly line for knowledge, engineered for both quality control and source protection. While this system flourished in the secular world of universities, monastic libraries were keen observers and sometimes participants. A monastery seeking a copy of a rare theological work from a distant brother house might arrange a similar, cautious exchange of certified Pecia, ensuring their own scribes could produce a perfect duplicate without ever risking their precious original in transit. This was an early, powerful form of copyright and a regulated publishing economy. It recognized that to truly preserve knowledge, you had to control how it was reproduced, creating a trusted chain of custody from the original author to the reader's hands. This sophisticated understanding of information flow, this blueprint for secure dissemination, demanded an equally advanced tool for managing the explosion of texts it created. That tool was waiting in the library, a quiet revolution in the organization of thought itself. A single code could tell you everything about a book's home. As monastic libraries swelled from a few dozen volumes to hundreds, and then to thousands, the challenge of locating a specific text became immense. The 14th hack for knowledge survival was the Shelfmark, a brilliant spatial addressing system that turned the library into a logical, navigable grid. These were not random scribbles, they were precise location codes, often a combination of letters and Roman numerals, painted directly onto the book's spine or inscribed on a small parchment tag attached to its chain. A code like a .3.12 was a complete set of instructions. It told the librarian that this specific book belonged in the first bookcase, which might be designated A. Within that bookcase, it lived on the third shelf, marked as 3, and on that shelf, it was the 12th volume in the sequence. This was a spatial database crafted from ink and parchment, a system of organization so effective we still use its principles today. The true genius of the Shelfmark was its resilience. If a tired novice accidentally placed a book on the wrong shelf after a long night of study, its proper home was not a mystery. The code was right there on the object itself, a permanent reminder of its designated place in the grand intellectual scheme. This allowed for the library's order to be constantly and easily restored, preventing the slow decay into chaos that would have made the entire collection unusable. This logical mapping of knowledge was the physical counterpart to the intellectual map provided by the library's inventory. The Inventarium told you what the monastery owned, and the Shelfmark showed you exactly where to find it. Together, they created a seamless, self-correcting system for managing a treasure trove of books. But this physical and intellectual control over the collection raised a new, more subtle question. How could they protect the very act of reading from the human failings of haste and carelessness? A book's value was measured not just in gold leaf, but in the weight of a human soul. This 15th hack for knowledge survival wove a powerful web of social and spiritual bonds around every manuscript, a system centered on the Libavitti, the Book of Life. This sacred volume was far more than a membership list. It recorded the names of every monk who had ever taken vows, every noble benefactor who had gifted land or treasure, and every important layperson connected to the monastery's fate. When a wealthy patron donated a magnificent illuminated Bible or a rare text on astronomy, the act was commemorated with a formal entry. Their name was inscribed with honor in the Libavitti, and very often, a personalized note was also written directly into the donated book itself. This created a deeply personal connection between the object and its giver. To steal or damage that book was no longer a simple property crime. It was a profound act of disrespect against the donor and their eternal memory. In a society built on honor and the fear of damnation, this was a devastating deterrent. A noble family's social standing was tied to their pious generosity. If their donated gospel was defaced or stolen, it could jeopardize the very prayers the monks said for the donor's soul, a spiritual safety net the entire family relied upon for salvation. This network of obligation transformed the library from a collection of objects into a tapestry of interconnected lives. Each book was a node in a living social network, protected not by iron alone, but by reputation, honor, and the hope for eternal rest. The library's security was thus woven directly into the community's identity, making its protection a matter of collective honor. This profound understanding of human motivation, that we protect what we are connected to, would soon find expression in an even more intimate form of identification, one written in a hand the monks knew as well as their own. The margins of a medieval manuscript tell a second, quieter story. This 16th hack for knowledge survival turned the blank spaces around the text into a living record of intellectual ownership through glosses and marginalia. These were not random scribbles, but carefully written notes, corrections, and commentary added by generations of monks. A student might use the margin to clarify a difficult Latin phrase. A master theologian could add a lengthy philosophical rebuttal to an argument presented in the main text. Over decades, these layers of annotation created a unique scholarly fingerprint for the book. The specific style of handwriting, the choice of which passages to comment on, and the intellectual traditions reflected in those notes all pointed directly to a specific monastic school. A thief attempting to sell such a book would face an impossible task. He could not simply erase these notes without damaging the priceless parchment, and any potential buyer familiar with the work of, say, the Cistercian order would immediately recognize the distinctive glossing style and question how such a context-specific object had left its home. This deeply embedded intellectual history made the book far more valuable to its original community than to any outsider. Its true worth lay not just in the primary text, but in the accumulated wisdom of its readers, a conversation frozen in ink that was impossible to counterfeit. The manuscript became a portrait of its own use, a living document whose identity was inseparable from the community that had studied and cherished it. This profound connection between a text's content and its physical community would eventually inspire monks to reshape the book itself for specialized tasks, leading to innovations in format that we still recognize today. Some books were born to travel. While the great chained folios of the library were rooted in place, the 17th hack involved a completely different kind of book, one designed for a life on the road. These were the portable altars, the traveling psalters, and the pocket missals carried by priests and monks on their journeys. Their very form was a direct response to the threat of movement itself. A book that never left the library could be heavy, rigid, and ornate. A book destined for a saddlebag had to be small, tough, and incredibly resilient. Scribes crafted these volumes in a reduced format, often no larger than a modern paperback. Their bindings were made of flexible leather, stitched with extra strength to endure constant opening and closing, and to resist the moisture and jostling of long journeys. For added protection, many were slipped into a second, custom-fitted cover made of soft velvet or supple deerskin, a protective envelope that shielded the precious text within from dust, rain, and the grime of the road. The most luxurious of these traveling companions even featured small metal bosses on their covers. These were not merely decorative. A priest celebrating Mass in a field or a drafty castle hall could place the book down on a rough wooden table, and these raised metal studs would lift the leather cover slightly off the surface, preventing scratches and moisture damage. Every element of its design, from its size to its hardware, was a deliberate act of preservation. This adaptability reveals a profound truth about monastic ingenuity. They did not have a one-size-fits-all approach to protecting knowledge. They understood that the form of the book had to follow its function. A text's survival depended on a perfect marriage between its content and the life it was meant to lead. This philosophy of purpose-built design, so clearly seen in the traveling psalter, was applied with equal creativity to the massive reference works that never moved an inch. The sacred duty of protecting books extended even into the solitude of a monk's private cell. For an individual's most treasured personal texts, The 18th hack offered a fortress in miniature, the lockable book chest. These were not crude boxes, but often beautifully carved wooden caddies, small enough to sit on a writing desk or be stored securely under a bed. A monk might keep his personal psalter inside, the one he used for his private morning prayers, or his own annotated copy of the Rule of Saint Benedict. A small, sturdy hasp and an iron lock secured its contents, a tangible expression of personal responsibility. This practice created a vital second layer of security, complementing the grand communal protection of the main library. It prevented the casual, well-meaning borrowing that could lead to a book's disappearance for weeks. A monk could retire to his cell for study, confident that his essential tools, his own small library of parchment and ink, would be exactly where he left them. This act of personal custodianship mirrored the broader monastic obsession with order and care, extending the library's protective ethos into the most intimate spaces of daily life. It recognized that knowledge needed guardians at every scale, from the vast chained library down to the single, locked box beside a simple bed. This meticulous attention to the individual's role in preservation would soon manifest in an even more profound way, as monks began to weave their own identities directly into the fabric of the books they created. The soiled corner of a page for Christmas Eve told its own story of reverence and repetition. This 19th hack for knowledge survival was an accidental one, a passive form of data collection written not in ink, but in the very wear and tear of the parchment itself. Liturgical calendars, found in nearly every psalter and breviary, mapped the entire spiritual year with its feast days, fasts, and commemorations. These pages became a physical record of the community's daily life. The vellum for the great feasts, Easter and Christmas, would grow soft and darken from the constant touch of a monk's thumb, the oils from his hand slowly transferring to the page each time he found his place for Mass. In contrast, the page for an obscure martyr's day might remain crisp and pale, virtually untouched from one year to the next. An observant librarian, while performing his regular inspections, could read this map of use as clearly as any written report. He could see which books were the workhorses of daily prayer, their spines strained and their key pages softened from constant handling. This told him which volumes needed his attention most urgently, which might require reinforcement or even a full recopying before they fell apart completely. This was resource management driven by pure observation, a way of listening to the books themselves to understand the operational heartbeat of the monastery. It ensured that the texts most vital to their spiritual survival were always the ones kept in the best physical health. This silent conversation between user and object, this feedback loop written in grime and use, demonstrates a profound intimacy with their collection. They were not just storing books, they were living with them, and the books, in turn, were recording the story of that life. This deep, almost symbiotic relationship with knowledge would soon inspire a final, ultimate act of preservation, one that would demand the rewriting of an entire library by hand. A single page could hold a fortune in powdered gemstones and beaten gold. The 20th hack for protecting knowledge weaponized beauty itself, turning the luminous art of illumination into a formidable shield. Those breathtakingly intricate paintings that fill the margins of a gospel book, the shimmering gold leaf that catches the light, were far more than decorative flourishes. They were a statement of staggering, almost impossible value. The most brilliant blue pigment, ultramarine, was painstakingly ground from semi-precious lapis lazuli, a stone mined only in distant Afghanistan and more expensive than gold itself. To steal such a book was not like stealing a simple text. It was like walking out of a treasury with the crown jewels, an object so conspicuous and unique it could never be discreetly sold. Any potential buyer, especially a wealthy noble or a rival monastery, would immediately recognize such a masterpiece and demand to know its origin. A thief would find no market for a treasure that screamed its own illicit history. But the protection went deeper than mere economics. Look closely at those illuminated scenes. Alongside serene portraits of saints, artists often depicted the terrors of the Last Judgment, with grotesque demons dragging the souls of the wicked into the gaping mouth of hell. For a monk contemplating a sinful act, or for any believer who understood the imagery, opening that book meant staring directly at the potential consequences of betraying its sacred trust. The art served as a continuous, powerful sermon on the fate of thieves, a psychological barrier woven from divine wrath and sublime beauty. This was security through magnificence. The monks ensured that the most visually striking and valuable object in the room was also the most dangerous to steal, both in this world and the next. The book's own glorious appearance became its most eloquent guardian. The very ink on the page was a chemical signature. This 21st hack for knowledge survival turned the writing medium itself into a guardian against forgery, rooted in the secretive world of ink recipes. A scriptorium did not simply buy its ink, it brewed it like a master alchemist, following formulas that were often closely guarded secrets passed from one head scribe to the next. The most common and durable type was iron gall ink, a deceptively simple concoction with immense power. It began with oak galls, those strange, apple-like growths formed on oak trees when a wasp lays its eggs. These galls were crushed and soaked in water to release their rich tannic acid. This liquid was then mixed with iron sulfate, a green crystalline salt, and finally bound with gum arabic, a natural sap, to give the ink the right consistency for flowing from a quill. The magic and the security lay in the subtle variations. One monastery might use rainwater collected in a specific copper basin, introducing trace minerals that altered the ink's final hue. Another might add a secret ingredient, like a drop of wine or a particular berry juice, to give their ink a unique, slightly purplish undertone as it aged. These minute differences in formula created a distinct chemical fingerprint for the manuscripts produced in that specific place and time. A forger attempting to add a false passage to a legal document or alter a line of scripture would face an impossible task. Even if he could match the color perfectly to the naked eye on the day of the forgery, the aging process would inevitably betray him. Original iron gall ink matures to a deep, rusty brown, bonding with the parchment in a specific way. A newer, chemically different ink would age along a different path, perhaps remaining blacker or fading to a different shade, revealing the tamper like a scar. This was an authentication system baked into the very molecules of the text. The integrity of the written word was protected not just by locks and curses, but by the unique, irreproducible nature of the substance used to write it. This profound level of control over their materials reveals a world where every single component of a book, down to the liquid in the ink pot, was part of a grand, integrated defense. And this meticulous control would soon extend to the very structure of the page, creating a grid so powerful it would shape how we read for centuries to come. Every monk was a guardian, and every pair of eyes a silent sentinel. The 22nd hack for knowledge survival was the community watch itself, a living, breathing security system built on collective responsibility. The protection of the library was never the sole duty of the librarian. It was woven into the daily fabric of monastic life. In this tight-knit community, every brother was expected to be vigilant. An unfamiliar face lingering too long in the cloister, a book spotted in a corridor where it did not belong, or the faint sound of a chain rattling at an odd hour, any of these small anomalies would immediately arouse quiet suspicion. The very architecture of their day supported this. The rule of silence that governed so many parts of the monastery, especially the library, created an environment of heightened awareness. In a room where the only sounds were the turning of parchment pages and the soft scratch of a quill, any unusual noise, like the hurried footsteps of someone who did not belong, became magnified. This was not a culture of paranoia, but one of profound, shared commitment. The spiritual and intellectual wealth contained in those books was the lifeblood of their entire community, a treasure held in common trust. A stolen manuscript was not just a loss of property, it was a wound to the collective soul. This meant the library became one of the most observed spaces in the entire monastic complex, not by a single guard, but by dozens of dedicated stakeholders who understood the value of what they protected. This human network was perhaps the most resilient defense of all, an ever-present, intuitive system that no lone thief could easily outwit. And just as the community watched over the books themselves were designed to watch over the community, with some volumes containing secrets that could only be unlocked by the collective memory of the monks who used them. A torn page was not a minor inconvenience, it was a crisis in the making. The 23rd hack for knowledge survival was a relentless commitment to binding repair and proactive maintenance, a philosophy of constant care that treated every book as a living patient. Monastic communities did not wait for a binding to fail completely. Skilled bookbinders, often monks themselves with decades of experience, performed regular inspections of the collection. Their trained eyes scanned for the earliest warning signs, a slight wobble in a wooden board, a fraying thread on a spine, or a leather cover beginning to pull away from its sturdy backing. They knew that a single broken stitch left unattended could lead to an entire choir of pages falling out, transforming a coherent text into a vulnerable, disordered pile of parchment. These loose pages were a security nightmare, easily misplaced, accidentally mixed with other documents, or quietly pocketed by an unscrupulous visitor. A complete, tightly bound book was a fortress, but a damaged one was a house with its doors left open. The repairs themselves were acts of reverence. A binder would not simply slap on a new piece of leather. He would carefully source materials that matched the original, using tanned goat skin of a similar thickness and color, and hand-stitch the binding with linen thread, employing the exact same techniques used by the book's original creator centuries before. This was not about making the book look new, it was about honoring its history while ensuring its future. This continual, quiet work in a corner of the scriptorium was a profound declaration. It said that knowledge was not a static thing to be locked away, but a vibrant inheritance that demanded active, loving stewardship. A library where the books were physically sound was a library where the knowledge within was truly secure, ready to be handled, studied, and passed on, generation after generation. This deep, long-term perspective on preservation, this view of books as enduring legacies, would ultimately inspire the most ambitious and definitive act of safeguarding the medieval world could conceive. The echo of a chained manuscript sliding on its rod resonates in the quiet click of a password granting access to a digital archive. Our final monastic hack is not a single technique, but a living legacy, one that quietly underpins the very architecture of our modern information world. The 24 strategies we have explored were not buried in the past. They were a blueprint waiting for a new age to rediscover their wisdom. Consider the humble library catalogue, the Inventarium, with its meticulous entries for author and subject. This is the direct ancestor of the searchable metadata that powers every digital library, every online database, and every internet search you perform today. When you filter results by date or file type, you are using a principle refined in a medieval scriptorium. The monk's system of controlled access, of oaths and logbooks, finds its mirror in our world of user authentication and digital rights management. Your password is your personal key to a digital armarium, and the log of your activity is the modern equivalent of the librarian's borrowing ledger, a chain of custody for bits and bytes instead of parchment and ink. Even the physical layout of a modern university library, with its non-circulating reference section and its freely borrowed stacks, is a direct evolution of the monk's distinction between the chained reference book, too vital to leave the room, and the text that could travel. The challenges they faced are our challenges scaled to a global digital network. How do we preserve fragile data from the decay of obsolete formats, our modern version of crumbling parchment? How do we organize the overwhelming flood of digital information without succumbing to chaos? How do we secure our most precious knowledge from theft and corruption? The monastic response was a holistic philosophy, a layered defense that integrated physical security, human oversight, and psychological deterrence. Their greatest lesson was that no single lock is ever enough. True resilience comes from a system of interconnected safeguards where the Catalogue supports the Shelfmark, the chain complements the curse, and the community watches over it all. Their ingenuity provides a profound historical perspective, reminding us that the core principles of information science are timeless. We are still building libraries, just with different tools. We are still that monk in the scriptorium, carefully inscribing our collective knowledge, hoping it will survive the centuries. From the silent vigilance of the chained library to the cunning deception of the misfolded page, these 24 monastic hacks reveal a world of profound ingenuity. These monks were far more than simple hoarders of old texts. They were the active, creative guardians of the intellectual flame in a precarious and dangerous age. Their solutions formed a comprehensive system, a layered defense that wove together the architectural and the cryptographic, the deeply social and the powerfully spiritual. This was not a random collection of tricks. It was a logically sound, interlocking philosophy for preserving the written word against every conceivable threat. In our current era of relentless data breaches and the silent decay of digital files, their ancient strategies speak to us with startling clarity. They remind us that the core principles of intelligent organization, of proactive security, and of shared community stewardship are truly eternal. The challenges have simply changed their form. We now fight digital corrosion instead of mold, and password-protected firewalls instead of iron-banded doors. Yet the fundamental goal remains identical: to ensure that our most vital knowledge survives its journey into the future. Let the quiet dedication of these monastic masters inspire you to look at your own life. How do you protect the information that matters most to you? Are your digital files organized and backed up with the same care as a library's inventarium? Do you value your personal records and family histories with the reverence of a scribe guarding his psalter? This journey into the past is not just about understanding history. It is about rediscovering timeless tools for navigating our own information-saturated world. If this exploration has illuminated a new path for you, we would love to hear which monastic hack resonated most deeply. Share your favorite in the comments below and join us for our next exploration into the hidden wisdom of history. The quiet discipline of a medieval monk can become your most powerful digital strategy. We may not be chaining our laptops to desks, but we can directly apply these ancient principles to secure our modern lives. Start with the humble file folder on your computer. The monastic inventarium, that master catalog, inspires us to move beyond chaotic desktops and cryptic file names. Adopt clear, logical naming conventions. Instead of Document 1 Final Revised, use Project Proposal Marketing Q4 2024. Create a folder structure that mirrors the library's classified shelves, with main categories and specific subfolders, making every piece of data instantly locatable. This simple act of digital housekeeping is your first line of defense against loss and confusion. Next, consider the monastery's controlled access. In our world, this translates directly to the fortress of your online accounts. A strong, unique password for every service is your personal oath of protection, a digital vow to guard your virtual gate. But the monks knew one lock was rarely enough. Enable two-factor authentication wherever it is offered. This is the modern equivalent of needing both the librarian's key and the abbot's permission, adding a crucial second layer that would stop most intruders in their tracks. Think of the collaborative Pecia system the next time you work on a shared project. Cloud-based tools like shared drives or collaborative documents are our version of the stationer's certified exemplar. Your team can all work simultaneously on the same master file, contributing their section without ever risking the integrity of the core document. No more endless email chains with conflicting versions, just a single, secure source of truth that everyone can access but no one can accidentally destroy. Finally, embrace the principle of the communal watch. In a monastery, every monk was a guardian. In your office or family, foster a culture of cybersecurity awareness. Encourage others to be vigilant about suspicious emails, to use password managers, and to report anything unusual. This transforms digital security from a solitary burden into a shared responsibility, creating a human network of defense that is incredibly difficult to breach. By viewing our own data, our family photos, our work projects, with even a fraction of the reverence the monks had for their manuscripts, we stop being passive users and become active guardians. We can build personal systems that are not just convenient, but truly resilient, ready to face the challenges of the 21st century with wisdom that is centuries